Juliet Shore isn't alone in calling for shorter working hours. Nick Cernick is a lecturer at King's College London and co-author of Inventing the Future, Post-Capitalism and a World Without Work. He's part of a new generation of thinkers, reviving the old utopian dream of more free time. On his book's cover, in bold black letters, are the words, "Demand full automation, demand universal basic income, demand the future."
My sort of vision for a future is of a post-work world. So this would be the effort to reduce work as much as possible. And this would include things like pushing automation into areas where it doesn't necessarily exist at the moment. We also need to be having something like a universal basic income. And this universal basic income would be a supplement to the welfare state. It would be applied universally, so no questions asked. It wouldn't be means tested. And it would have to be at a sufficient level that it allows people to survive on it without having to necessarily find a job. And that's a response to the threat of technological unemployment. The other aspect is a reduced working week. So again, if we have technology reducing the amount of work that society needs to do, the easiest response is simply to cut the working week down. So those three sort of possibilities, I think, are the sort of image of the future that I have, where we are trying to, as a society, reduce the amount of work that we have to do in order to give us more free time, in order to give us the opportunity to choose exactly what we want to do, rather than being forced into a job we don't like for 40 hours or more a week. And then also sort of thinking about, well, how do we get rid of this culture that is so focused on the work ethic, that, our entire identities are often based upon our jobs. So these are the sorts of things that we need to be imagining and thinking about in order to be able to get our system in a situation where this automation can occur, but it doesn't lead to mass unemployment or lots of precarious work and lots of low-wage work.
Now, some people would say that's utopian, and that's often used in a disparaging way. Like, that's not realistic, it's never going to happen. So how do you respond to that charge?
I do think this image is utopian, but I don't think it's utopian in a sort of abstract sense. So there's a distinction we can make between a sort of concrete utopia and an abstract utopia. And an abstract utopia is one which is completely unrelated to the changes going on in the world at the time and sort of what exists at the moment. It's just something which is a pure product of our imagination. On the other hand, we have a concrete utopia, which is taking into account how the world is changing, what is going on. And I think that the sort of post-work world is utopian in that sense. I think it's something which presently at this moment seems beyond the realm of the possible. But of course, the realm of the possible is not something which is static. It's something which changes over time. At one point, universal health care was deemed to be impossible. The welfare state was deemed to be impossible. Women's voting rights was deemed to be impossible. All of this stuff historically has been seen as, utopian, and eventually becomes just the normal state of affairs. Now, I think the same thing can happen with the post-work world. And I think as technology starts changing our economies, increasingly we're going to have to be using these sorts of ideas, these utopian images, to guide where we're headed.
There's a lot of fear about the implementation of technology and, the dystopian view that it's going to really destroy jobs. And yet you say, bring it on and demand full automation. Why do you have to demand it? Isn't it happening?
Yeah. So it's demanding it sort of points to a couple of different things. Capitalism doesn't automate everything. Capitalism automates what it finds profitable. And a lot of work that we find to be the worst work and, drudgery, capitalism doesn't automate simply because it's not cost effective for them to do so. There's an interesting sort of phenomenon going on in a lot of advanced countries right now where productivity growth is not growing or is growing at a very slow rate. And productivity growth is effectively our measure of how much automation is going on. So we would expect that if there was a lot of automation going on, we would see very high levels of productivity growth, but we're not seeing that. Now, part of the reason why is because wages have been stagnant since about the 1970s. The average person in the US and Canada and the UK only makes the same amount as what they made in the 1970s. So this effectively means that there is no wage pressures for automation. So you can imagine if you're running a business, if wages start going up, suddenly those expensive machines over there start to look a bit cheaper. And effectively, as wages go up, you're more likely to start purchasing machines, purchasing automation, and increasing productivity. So I think that if we start thinking about how do we increase minimum wage, how do we increase the strength of unions, how do we increase the strength of workers, we'll start to see more automation, we'll start to see a more advanced economy, higher productivity growth, higher economic growth, and then we'll have to also think about the sort of post-work turn as well.
The fight to raise the minimum wage has met with some success in Canada. Both Ontario and Alberta plan to increase it to $15 an hour. But the announcements have been met with veiled threats from business owners who've claimed that the increase will lead to layoffs, automation, or outsourcing.
One of the big examples recently has been the Fight for 15 in America, so looking for a $15 minimum wage in fast food services. And McDonald's and other companies have basically replied and said, well, if we have to pay our workers that much money, we'll just automate them away. And there's a sense in which today, under this current system, those people losing jobs is a bad thing. But of course, we want to build a system where that's not a bad thing, where actually this means that those people are no longer doing what are often terrible, hot, sweaty, very frustrating and annoying jobs. They no longer have to do them. That, to me, I think would be a great thing. But we have to build up the social system that enables that to be a good thing.